Okay, everybody, Stephen Key here, and I have a very special guest. In fact, this topic you're going to love because we're going to peel back the curtain on some things that are happening at the USPTO. That's right, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I know a lot of people out there are filing patents, and Brian, they're feeling like I do, that the USPTO is this big government organization, and they don't really care about me. But before we get into that topic, Brian, thank you for coming on inventRightTV.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you wrote this wonderful article, and we're going to link to it down below so people can read more about your perspective, because your perspective at the USPTO is very unique. And why is that?
So I'm in a very unique position because I started as a patent agent. So I was working, helping getting people patents. And then I went to be a patent examiner where I got to see the inner workings of the PTO. And now I'm back to helping people as a patent agent. So that kind of gave me a very unique perspective of seeing, okay, I saw this on one side, but let me look and see why it happened that way on the inside. So I was kind of like the patent office spy.
So when I read that article, it was very intriguing because you have a different perspective. I mean, you're helping inventors file patents, so you can see the difficulty of doing that, working with the USPTO and patent examiners. And then you became one. And you could see their difficulty dealing with inventors and applications. So let's start with what did you feel like when you were just helping inventors file patents? I mean, what was your perspective at that point?
So to me, it seemed like the patent office was this machine that would just, this rejection machine that they were completely there to just ruin my inventors on that. And then I would see just a tremendous variation in what I considered quality at the time. But as I mentioned in my article, what I thought was quality issues at the time were just different people's having different perspectives on what they're looking at. Like two people can look at the same thing and see different things. And I think that was what I thought were quality issues.
Okay.
On the outside.
All right. So you're helping inventors, and what happened for you to join the USPTO?
So it was an unfortunate circumstance on my end. So the law firm I was working at, their business went down. So I ended up getting laid off.
Okay.
And then everyone told me the PTO was the best place to get experience because at the time I'd only logged in about 7 months and it takes about 2 years to be proficient.
Okay.
So I joined the patent office to build up my experience clock.
Okay. So what was it like? How many patent examiners are there at the USPTO?
For utility patents, which is how there's three different types of patents: plant, utility, and design. Design is how it looks. Plant is like a vegetable. And then utility is what most people think about. So there's about 8,000, a little bit over 8,000 utility patent examiners.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It is. The big challenge, or like on the outside, I said, okay, I'm going to go in the patent office and I figure out everything they do wrong and tell them how to run their business perfectly. But when you get to the point of saying 8,000 people, it's like, how can you be fair with 8,000 people? And I think that's where the machine field comes from. The patent offices, they're trying to be fair and consistent with everyone, both applicants and examiners. So it has to have these very rigid set of rules to cover every circumstance.
So it's not easy for a patent examiner. I mean, they have a pretty difficult job. Can you explain to us how long does a patent examiner actually work on a case? Is it overall the estimate?
So it varies on two things. There are two major factors. There is the grade level. So there's a GS7, GS9, so kind of your rank. And then also there's the technology center that you're doing patents in. So I was GS7, which is pretty much the lowest rank. And I was in artificial intelligence, which has the most time. So I had about 48 hours for a case on that. And some of the mechanical guys have significantly less time, and 48 hours for the entire case. And then there was some little stuff that you could get extra time for. Like if I did an interview, I would get an extra hour. And then the patent offices started rolling out some other things to give a little extra time for here and there.
That doesn't seem like a lot of time.
Oh, it's not. It is so challenging to find the prior art because the patent office search tools for the prior patents are extremely good. There's no search tool I've seen that's as good as the internal tools the Patent Office has.
Okay.
But once we switch over to non-patent literature, that gets to be extremely challenging.
Okay.
Because with patents, people write a very standard format of their practitioners write a very standardized format versus when you're doing non-patent literature, it's professors that are writing all over the place and then people putting blog articles and that sort of thing.
Let's talk about a little bit about office actions. Okay, because I think a lot of inventors get into this and don't understand that, they come up with a great invention, maybe they build a prototype, and maybe they file a provisional patent application, and maybe if they see that this is going to be a good idea, they go to a non-provisional patent application, and then they work with a patent agent or a patent attorney, and they draft it, they file it. All right, so there's that whole process, but afterwards, what happens? It lands on the examiner's desk, and he's looking for prior art, correct? To see if this is new and novel. Is that the way that kind of works?
So the patent office is this big big assembly line. So there's people that will check the drawings, and then there's people that will do this and this and this. And so by the time it gets to my or the examiner's desk, it's already been, a lot of the things have been checked, but some of the things have not been checked. Like we check for it has to be new, it has to be non-obvious, it has to be a statutory category, 35 USC 101. And then there's also some other things. It has to be the 112s, 35 USC 112s, where it has to be clear.
Okay. But Brian, tell me, because I've been through the process a few times. Okay, so, and it seems to me that first office action comes back from that, from the patent examiner, and they're finding prior art that really doesn't relate to my invention at all. It's like, what was he thinking? Why did he see those? Those don't relate at all. Why is that happen that way?
So as a practitioner, there's a game we play. So we always try to claim far more than what we get. It's almost like, one analogy is if you put your house for sale on the market and it sells the very same day, you're going to ask yourself, did I leave money on the table? So the same thing with patent when we're writing an application is we try to go extremely broad, and we want the examiners to come back and find prior art. Like if we draft one that's automatically allowed, we think, okay, maybe we didn't go broad enough. Maybe we left some money on the table. So as a practitioner, we always want to go a little broad. There's ethical rules about how broad we can go, but we want to go as broad as possible. So we actually want a rejection the first time. And then the ideal case is, at least my drafting strategy is, I would try to go some really broad down to really narrow, and then that way I give the examiner a good place to draw the line in the sand, and that gives us a lot of room to move forward to.
Wow, I didn't look at it that way. So the patent attorney or patent agent's trying to go as broad as he can, and by going as broad as he can, that patent examiner is finding prior art that's very broad, correct?
Definitely. And the patent examiners are trained to find the closest prior art to the whole application. So if the process works exactly like it should, the examiner will look at the claims in the overall application, and he will find the best prior art. And then we say, okay, well, this is how the prior art's different than our application, and we'll just claim the part that's different. But in the ideal situation, sometimes that doesn't happen, but that would be the ideal.
Well, that would be ideal, Brian, but it doesn't ever happen that way. I get this prior art that's like, but it seems to me there's a process, and maybe there's a game being played, because it seems like very quickly this prior art comes, and now I've got to reply back to that office action. It is expensive. How important is it to talk to your patent agent or patent attorney to get an interview, to really understand what those objections are from the patent examiner?
I think it's critical. That's the best way. And then in my article, I tried to stress, like, there's something going on in that examiner's mind of why he said that. Like, for example, like, say your inventor developed a boot, and then say the examiner finds prior art for a shoe, and he says, hey, you claimed a foot covering apparatus. So right, that would cover that. So we'll talk to the examiner. The examiner will say, well, you claimed it this way, so therefore that covers, your boot covers a shoe. And they're like, okay, well, look, how about if I claim it this way? Would that distinguish over that? And then the examiner can say yes or no. And then sometimes the examiner will come back and say, well, I have to do another search. But
Okay. What I really like about those interviews, because I've been on a few of them, I'm always nervous. I don't say anything. I just listen, by the way. Okay. So, because it's at first, they seem to be kind of at different ends, they're at different sides. And you could tell there's a little argument at the very beginning, positioning. But I've noticed that a good patent attorney or patent agent seems to ask the right questions to get that examiner to actually tell them what they need to do to get that patent. Is that kind of how that plays out a little bit?
I only did a few interviews, so I was at the patent office for a little less than a month, or a little less than a year. So I didn't see a lot of interviews. I had like three, and everybody that I dealt with was very professional. Like it was kind of like our conversations, like, hey, examiner, you said this. Hey,
Okay.
why did you say this? This sort of thing, just trying to understand or the best interviews are trying to understand.
Okay.
Because if you make it adversarial, the patent examiner will dig in their heels and then you don't make any progress. So you kind of want to be at a
Okay.
team, like the examiner is representing the public as a whole, and then we're trying to represent the inventor. So we want to be sure that both sides,
I love that you
both
said they're
sides,
representing the public as a whole. Okay. So you really want to find whoever's going to help you navigate through the system of actually getting a patent. You want to make sure they have some pretty good people skills.
those are the best practitioners that I've met. So, sometimes attorneys or people that are really good on paper are not quite as good in person. But it's one of the ones, like the examiner is a person. Like he just treat it as an examiner. Treat the examiner as a person. And
Okay.
just talk to him like don't try to argue with him. Oh, you're wrong. But try to understand and
Okay.
say, hey, I view it this way. Do you see
Okay.
why I got there, and why do you think why I got there is wrong? And just try to come to an
Okay.
understanding.
Hey, Brian, quick question here. I felt at the very beginning, I know a lot of people out there, that the USPTO is just against you, right? They don't want you to get a patent. They hate you. They're going to hold my invention. They want to stop me from commercializing my invention. Is that true or not?
So, you know what? As an outsider, before I went to the patent office, I felt that way. And I felt that like they would like high five themselves in the back room when they got this over on the inventor. But when I actually got in to see them, I found that the people in the patent office really care. They want to help the inventors on that. And just the mostly where the inventor, or the most of what people call quality is just differences in opinions.
The one thing I've noticed about the USPTO, I think they do care. I've been to some of their events throughout the years, and I'm always amazed at how much they do care. And they're the 800, the 1-800 number. If you've got a problem, call them. They'll talk to you. They'll guide you. I think their customer service is spectacular for their size. So I'm just here to tell everybody, understand the system as best you can. They're not out to get you. I know it feels that way, but it's not true. But keep inventing. That's what I tell everybody. Just learn the system. One last question I have. Someone told me that when you write your non-provisional patent application, if you can tell a story a little bit that the patent examiner can identify with, that it kind of sells it a little bit for him. Is that true?
So the better you can communicate to the examiner, the better. There's also some legal ramifications of if you can put yourself in a hole. So a lot of people try to stay away from that because they can say the wrong things. But the more you can help the examiner understand what you're doing and what's new versus what's old and all that, the better he can understand that, the better he can go looking for everything. But there's been some litigation issues, so people tend to be just so broad that you really can't distinguish. Like you have
Okay.
no idea, okay, what's the improvement?
Well, let's talk
What
about.
problem are you?
I've got another question because you kind of opened another door about being too broad. It seems to me that's the goal of the inventor, and that's the goal of the patent agent or the patent attorney. That makes sense, right? But that can come back to hurt you later. Can it? Being too broad?
It can. There's been some issues in litigation, but that's a really deep rabbit hole to go down. But so yeah, it can be, but usually, yeah, I'm bringing that up a little bit in the article, and we can do another call, and I can go into some more depth about that. But yeah, that's a rabbit hole. But yeah, so you have to consider where the patent will end up, like who else will read it.
Okay.
You don't want to be able to confuse a jury with, or the judge or the opposing. So you're kind of balancing between, you want the examiner to really understand what you're doing, but you don't want to give enough rope so someone else can come along and hang you with it. So it's kind of a very interesting, it's kind of a seesaw balancing sort of act.
All right. Well, I'll bring you back.
Okay, sounds good.
Brian, thank you very much. I think this is really interesting, and I think the more we can have a conversation about both sides of it, I think it's going to be really important for all of us to understand and have a little empathy for both sides a little bit and say, okay, the system isn't perfect. It is our system. It does work. It's been around for a while, and I love it. So, Brian, another question for you. So what do you do? Are you helping inventors? I mean, are you thinking about helping, because your perspective is so important?
So I'm definitely helping inventors. One of the areas that I'm in the process of creating some content for is to help the smaller independent inventors. Like the US system is set up so that a small inventor can get a provisional or file a provisional patent application and then have a year to go and raise money and have the money to do a non-provisional patent or an actual patent application. So yeah, I want to try to help inventors.
Okay. So we'll put some information down below, and hopefully you can help a few inventors.
Definitely, I hope so. I've had a lot of people help me, and I hope to give some back.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.